Welcome to a special episode of The Day After. Today's bonus episode is in honor of National Grief Awareness Day. To honor this day, we've compiled all of the pieces of advice from our guests to date into one episode for you. We really hope you enjoy this episode.
And if you've lost somebody and are grieving, we'd love to hear what advice you have for somebody who's going through what you've gone through. So go ahead, reach out to us on thedayafter.com or hit us up on The Day After Online on Instagram. Thanks and enjoy the show. Is there any one last thing that you would like to leave somebody who has gone through what you've gone through, or is caring for somebody who's gone through what you've gone through that you'd want to leave them with?
It's so hard to think of something to say that doesn't sound cliche, but my mantra I kind of felt like was really 1 minute at a time. People say 1 day at a time. For me, it really had to be one minute at a time. And I used to get mad when people say, you'll be happy again, you're going to do this, but you will. Yeah. You will be happy again. And like you said, you'll have space for your grief still, always. Like I will always save space for that. But I do feel like I'm starting to learn how to be happy again. So it's a journey, 1 minute, just 1 minute at a time.
Give yourself a lot of grace while you're grieving. Don't be hard on yourself for how it comes out. People are really, really forgiving when they know you're going through something. And yeah, the amount of time that you're going through something is going to be tenfold compared to how other people see it or treat it. And you're allowed that amount of time. It doesn't have to look like anyone else's grief.
I think just, 1 day at a time. Never hold yourself to a standard. Everything is different. Every day is going to be different. Every situation is going to be different. Always give yourself that slack. And also never take life too seriously. Go have fun, do dumb shit. Nobody makes it out alive. You can always live your life and try and be the best, perfect, pillar of perfection. But at the end of the day, we all end up in the same spot. Enjoy it.
Yeah, I would say we'll have thoughts for both, I guess. Like for the griever is that your feelings are always valid and not to listen to people who tell you how to grieve. There's no right or wrong way. I think where it could be concerning is if, every single day someone's not getting out of bed, but the right thing to say isn't, you need to get yourself out of bed. It's like, what can I do to help you, support you? Like even offering to help find a therapist or whatever it is. So yeah, just not telling people how they should be handling their grief. And then for the people who are supporting or trying to support those who grieve, don't be afraid also to get help. Because I think sometimes a lot of people are hesitant to do that, and just make sure you're pouring back into yourself, because it's incredibly draining and exhausting to go through grief. And like we were saying earlier, it's not something that goes away. So just acknowledging that, I think, is important.
It sounds so, cliche, but you don't have to worry about saying something. Being there and just, coming over without invitation is okay. Because I'm not going to call you to come over and let me cry on your shoulder.
That's
you
right.
Show up, and I will cry on your shoulder if I need to.
I think what my therapist always tells me, and what I believe to be so true, is give yourself grace and time, because grief is just such a journey that is unpredictable and also comes with waves, as we all know. And that's so corny to say, like, oh, grief comes in waves, but it's like really fucking true. Yeah. Like your grief will always come in waves. Right. And that's why, even my friends who are going through this or going through something similar, I always just say, you got to give yourself grace and be kind to yourself, because it sucks. And there's no other way to say it. It sucks.
The first thing that came to my mind was actually what frustrated me the most and was hardest for me when he passed was people who would not talk about him with me. I hated that. And I don't know if you felt like this, CJ, or if it's common to feel like this, but like I said earlier, like we talked about, like he was just here and now he's not a day later. And he was my everything. I lived with him all the time for 20 years. Like I can't just not talk about him. I wanted to talk about him all the time and other people didn't. And I hated that.
I would say the big thing for me is that like it's gonna be okay. Because it's just gonna, or it's not. And like that's like a personal choice. You know, like is it gonna be okay or is it not gonna be okay? Because it's not gonna change. You know, like time moves one direction. So it's like, and a lot of people will say like, oh, you need to do it and like honor their memory or like or live through their memory. Fuck that. It's all gonna be okay or it's not. And like that's a personal choice, right? Like you have the personal choice that after the trauma happens, after the hurt happens, to wake up every day and not feel sorry for yourself.
I think the only piece of advice, just based off of my experience, is to wake up each morning and don't be afraid to take that breath. And even though the world looks dark, it's only for right now. Every day is going to get a little lighter and a little lighter. But the more you reach out to touch somebody else and stop focusing on you, just you, and touching somebody else, the world starts getting its color back. And eventually there'll be a place where there will be no more darkness.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Day After. You can find this podcast and more at our website at www.thedayafter.com. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you take a moment to leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcast.